Welcome back to Preparing for Online Delivery. In this final video of the series, we'll be addressing ways to approach assessment, alternate assessment, and academic integrity. Luciano, would you mind getting us started?
Yes, for sure. So yes, the topic of assessment is one that we are being constantly asked for, and one that, rightfully so, it's one of the most important aspects of any course, being it delivered online or face-to-face. And when we're talking about assessment, what many instructors tend to focus on is on exams and final exams, particularly. However, when we transition to remote delivery, there are some important challenges that we have to be mindful of with online exams. One of them is, most often than not, those exams are synchronous. And then all the discussion and all the challenges of synchronous sessions also apply to synchronous online exams. So if students have challenges with their internet connection, they might be disadvantaged in that exam. If the students are parents or they are taking care of their of someone in their family, they might be disadvantaged because they might not be able to afford the time to do the exam. I mean, they might be essential workers and not be able to attend that particular session. So there's some challenges that were already part of the synchronous conversation, but they become so much more important when we're talking about synchronous exams, because if they don't have other opportunity to connect by any number of reasons, they might be disadvantaged in their grades. So that's one of the key aspects in term that you have to be mindful of when thinking about online exams. But there's also another concern in terms of how that exam is structured, especially when it relates to academic integrity. Several instructors have posed some concerns in terms of they're being afraid of students cheating or some other form of academic misconduct. With online exams, it can be quite hard to keep track of that. We know there are some proctoring services that are available to other institutions, but Mount Royal so far is not subscribing to any one of those tools. And one of the main reasons, a part of the financial aspect of it, is that those tools tend not to work 100% of the time. But I also points to the fact that there are many different ways in which students can cheat, especially in an online environment. So one of the ways in which you can think about those assessments is to think in terms of alternatives. First, if you're thinking about an online exam, think that those online exams will be open book exams, whether you want it or not. So design them with that perspective can help you. The other aspect in terms of online exams is if you plan on use that exam, maybe it's an exam that you have already been using for quite a few years, and you really want to use that in the future, maybe you have to think twice in terms of putting that exam online. Because again, it's easier for students to copy that information back, and then you have an unsafe exam. Another reason for you to think about alternative modes of assessment. So I just wanted to invite my colleagues here for them to share other concerns that they may have in terms of online exams.
Right. So as you well mentioned, you know, maybe look at an alternative assessment. But if you are doing exams in Blackboard, there are a few things, and we talked about this in the previous video when we're talking about organizing in Blackboard. But there are some strategies that you can use in Blackboard if you still want to do a traditional exam. So one thing we talked about is making sure you have a large pool of questions, and your exam is randomly drawn from a very large pool, and that effectively gives every student a different test. Another example would be you can prohibit backtracking and show questions one at a time in Blackboard. And as well, set a timer, not using the forced completion option, because as we mentioned in a previous video, that can get sticky, but just setting a timer saying, you know, if my students know the content and know this stuff, this is realistically how long it will take them to do the test. So between timing a test and randomizing questions, you can feel fairly safe that students are getting a unique test, and then that would reduce this idea of cheating. But let's be mindful too, you know, cheating is something that we always deal with anyways, regardless of mode of delivery. And I think in online, as Luciano pointed out, we might be more at risk of letting certain things out into the wild that we can't contain. And I think for that reason is why we want to rethink assessment wherever possible. And as I said before, really, what is assessment? We just want students to evidence their learning in a way that we can actually assess it. So what are the ways? I guess the question I would ask myself if I was thinking about an alternative approach, just how many ways can my students show me they know this? And think about ways that so an open book exam, or there's a lot of ways you can wiggle with this. But at the end of the day, those are good starter questions to help you formulate the right solution for you in your context.
Thanks, John. And again, that rethinking of your exams and your assessment is one of the crucial questions you might want to ask when thinking about assessment and overall. And I think you put it quite nicely when you're asking instructors to think in terms of evidence. So here the point is, how can you create an experience or create an activity or some other format that will allow your students to create evidence of their own learning? That is all. That's what assessment is all about. And we tend to default to exams, but there are other formats that we can imply on that. And again, going to the fundamentals, as John always mentions, think about your objectives of the course. Think about what you wanted your students to learn. You have that in front of your mind. You also have the different activities and opportunity you create for your students to learn that. So now your job is to create an opportunity for your students to provide you evidence that supports your claim that they have learned. So in ways of doing that online, again, you have many different alternatives, and we do have a repository that provides you with some ideas. But you can think in terms of infographics. You can think about having your students create video recordings of them explaining a problem. You can have them doing cumulative papers that sum up their knowledge and their learning from the semester. There are plenty of different strategies, and Patty might have other ones. So I'll pass over to Patty to discuss that further.
Oh, thanks, Luciano. Well, I'd like to share a couple of assessments that I've seen faculty who are teaching online put together that I thought were really, really powerful. So, for example, for a mental health course, the faculty member asked students for one of their assignments to create public service announcement or brochures. And so, you could do it in video format. It could be a brochure format. There were certain criteria. There was a rubric about what needed to be included. And very clearly, students had to demonstrate what they had learned in the course. And what ended up happening was the instructor was so pleased with the variety of different brochures that her students created. It allowed them to be very creative, but they also had to demonstrate what they knew, and they had to be concise about it. And so that was a really neat alternative assessment. The other thing I've seen is a portfolio of learning, where throughout the semester, students need to create particular objects, and it could be, and they had a choice. It's like you can create, 2 out of these different types of objects. So it could be like a recorded interview. It could be a podcast show. It could be an infographic, as Luciano mentioned. But they had to pick different kinds of artifacts, a poster perhaps, and they had to create these artifacts around topics of the course, and they had to do their own research on things, delving deeper into particular topics of the course, and then present that in a portfolio of learning. And there were some things where they had choices, as I said. There were other pieces that everybody had to do, so kind of introductory editorial piece. And that was a great way for students to showcase what they had learned throughout the course. And this project, because it did take the entire length of the course, they had to do kind of a mid-semester check-in and present what they'd worked on so far. And that was given some marks too. So it ensured students were working on this throughout the whole semester. And what was nice, the faculty members who have taught this course really enjoy that, because these portfolios of learning are really interesting and they're engaging, and students are being creative in how they're showing what they've learned. So it ends up being a little less onerous for the faculty members to mark, and it's a little more fun and engaging for the students. So those are two examples I really like from faculty that I've worked with, and and as Luciano said, there are many, many other examples of alternative assessments. On the pod site, we've got links to a lot of these places that'll give you ideas that'll be a fit for your course.
Right, and Patty, you reminded me of something as you're speaking, and those were great points that you made there. One way I like to do things would be to actually not have students do a bunch of separate little activities in the course, but actually have each activity build on the last, and then finally a culminating activity that takes it all together, that puts it all together. So you're kind of developing each little piece of the puzzle. The students are providing that back for assessment, and then they put the puzzle together as their final piece. I think there's why I like that is that you're scaffolding the course. So students are building towards something, and you can watch them do this throughout the whole way. And rather than them kind of spending their energies doing a bunch of different things, they're actually spending their energy creating something big at the end, which is kind of like the capstone for the course. So that's one way you can plan and structure your course as well. And Patty, your comments made that come to mind, so I thought I would share that.
Thanks, Patty. Thanks, John. And one of the considerations you might be thinking right now watching this video and us talking about these alternative modes of assessment is, okay, those are nice ideas, but what about marking? What about the time I'm going to be investing in marking those assessments? And to put things up front first, like we know that, especially if you were used to doing final exams that were multiple choice questions, yes, you're going to be spending more time marking them, just because with multiple choice questions, the marking time is quite minimal. And these alternative forms of assessment more often than not require students to create a fuller description of their learning, either through papers or through representations and some other formats. So yes, it's going to take a little bit more time, but there are some strategies you can use to mitigate that a little bit. One thing that John mentioned in his Blackboard video on assessment is the use of rubrics. So creating rubrics can be quite time-saving for you, because then once you have the rubric done and you can apply that to your assessment, it becomes easier for you to mark those papers. But it also becomes easier for students to create their projects, because then they have something to base on, so that they can refer back to the rubric and create products that address that. We do have some instructions on how to create rubrics in our pod website, so please refer to those as well. So I also wanted to mention that sometimes creating, as John mentioned, creating that cumulative project where you are providing feedback to students over the time of your course, even though in total will add up to quite a lot of marking, but it will not become all the marking done at the end of the semester, because you already know what is going to come. So you're providing that feedback and providing that assessment throughout the course. So that can also be another strategy that you can use to if not diminish the marking time, to space this out a bit, provide you some more space to think and to provide that marking to the students.
I would say, you know, for, like you said, Luciano, with multiple choice and defined answers, those get auto-graded in Blackboard. So if you want to do some sort of formative assessment to see where students are at, or just some weekly quizzes that keep students motivated. That's another thing I found in online courses. Right at the beginning, if you can do a low stakes, high reward activity, that'll get buy-in from your students quickly. They'll feel positive about the course, they feel good, and they're moving forward. Because one thing I always say is success is addictive, and once you get a taste of that success, you typically want to hold on to it and keep it going. So you can kind of leverage the LMS to do some of that heavy lifting for you around multiple choice, fill in the blanks. There's a few different self-grading question types in Blackboard. Know that when you do a written response, though, you do require your human eyes on it and to grade it. And that's where rubrics are a wonderful tool to come in as well. So I would just mention that just to let you know that that's a possibility for you.
Thanks, John. Another point I want to make, and I think it's the final comment in this video, is around academic integrity. And even though we mentioned beforehand that alternative modes of assessment diminish the chance of academic misconduct and cheating to happen, it does not preclude it. So one of the strategies several institutions are using, and it's quite useful, and there's some research already showcasing its effectiveness, is to ask students to acknowledge and to adhere to an honor code. So the way that is done is either at top part of an exam or in the project, students sign up and sign literally a statement saying that they have adhered to the university's academic conduct guidelines. That way, they are acknowledging that they have adhered to that honor code. They have done the job themselves and not tapped on each other's. Chances are, because they're signing that and they're committing the work, they're going to be less likely chance for them to commit some academic misconduct. So that's one of the strategies that we can also share in terms of maintaining that academic integrity in an online environment.
So, and Luciano, I think what I would like to add to the academic integrity piece is that at Mount Royal, we do use SafeAssign through Blackboard, which is our text matching software, or often called a plagiarism tool. We like to think of it as a learning tool. Know that if you're going to use that tool, there's policy involved with that. So please look into that policy in our Blackboard On Demand site. We do have a SafeAssign workshop that makes you aware of the policy, how to use the tool, and if you need any follow-up, please contact the ADC around that tool. And just know that this is not a gotcha tool by any means. In fact, I think if you're going to use it, it'd be a good practice to allow students to submit a draft through the SafeAssign so they get a report which does not go into the database, so they can actually see where they're being flagged first before they actually make a final submission to you. And that's why we call it a learning tool, so students actually improve their citation, improve their paraphrasing, so they're not blatantly ripping off somebody else's ideas. So consider SafeAssign. Know that it is not a gotcha tool. You need human eyes to interpret those reports. Just like anything else, before these technologies existed, we all had a toolkit around plagiarism. We still keep those good practices going. Today, we just look at that report saying, there's something I need to look at here. Don't treat it as like you're guilty, you've plagiarized. It just means I need to do some due diligence here and look at what the student is producing and why is it being flagged this way, and use all your normal common sense toolkit that you've used before to actually evaluate if it is plagiarism or not.
And that concludes the Preparing for Online Delivery video series. A huge thank you to Patty Mascaro, John Cheeseman, and Luciano Santos. If you have any follow-up questions or need specific support for your course, please feel free to contact us for a one-on-one consultation. You can find our contact information on both the ADC website and the POD website. Thank you for watching.